Kia ora, and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. It's your boy, Diggity Doodah Doc, Miss Peptide Panther, aka Mr. Left Foot Slipper, Mr. Jandal, because it's summertime. And we are here with the Wobbly Wildcard for another episode of the Niche Cast, coming to you live from the Niche Cache out of South Auckland, Papatoetoe to be specific. And we are here to chat through Kiwi sports stuff and just general niche case stuff that we like to do. We have just wrapped up the Patreon pre-podcast kōrero, where we put a focus on a topic and record it just for our Patreon. So this time around, we were discussing LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton. Obviously, they came from America to play in the NBL. RJ Hampton played with the New Zealand Breakers, and they are going to be drafted whenever the NBA draft is coming up. And we talked about a couple of ramifications for the NBL and just the wider context from our Kiwi perspective, which was pretty interesting. So check that out. We also deliver emails with Kiwi sporting notes come to you Monday and Friday. And of course, we're always busy writing in-depth analysis of Kiwi sporting topics. And I'll chuck it up to you, Wildcard. Kia ora to yourself. Based on what we just talked about with LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton, I was thinking about evaluating young talent and just how we go about it, because we both come from different sports. Like, you're talking a lot about football and obviously basketball, all the sports you cover. My main one is rugby league and a bit of cricket as well. So again, I don't want to be rude here. Hello to yourself.
Yeah. Hello, right back at you. Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't want to spoil what we sort of the last thing I ended the Patreon podcast with, but as a little teaser, I threw it out there about having talked for 25 minutes about NBA draft ramifications, pointing out that when it comes to once these players actually get drafted, once all the the sports sciencey, the draft sciencey stuff has been and gone, it really is kind of up to the players and the coaches and the game itself to see what happens. Like the best laid plans of how's that phrase go? The best laid plans of mice and men. So I actually saw that book for sale the other day at a second-hand thing, and I didn't buy it, so maybe I should have. I might have to read it now, but maybe that's why it's in my head even. But you get to a point where you can evaluate these draft prospects. You spend 23 hours a day working on watching all the video, working on all the different aspects, how they fit in your team, how what kind of progression do you expect them to make. But ultimately, you don't actually know how that progression will literally unfold. You can't predict injuries. You can't predict all sorts of things. It is a little bit of it's trying to apply logic to an ultimately illogical thing. And that's fine. That's what you have to do, because the more information you have, ultimately you're not really playing yourself against the players that you draft. You're playing yourself against the other teams that are drafting similar players. So you just have to do better than those other teams. But ultimately, it is a very, very impossible thing to predict, and I think that is applicable throughout most sports, where just teams and scouts and media as well. Media is a big part of this. Just the knowledge that we have about young players entering the top levels of sport these days, we know more about them now than ever before. There's it often comes across it's not as much of a surprise as it should be when players emerge, but I don't know. I think there's a little bit of romanticism that comes in the idea of just the breakout players, the truly unexpected ones, and whatever. And I think that's always going to be the case, no matter how much work you put into the scouting. That's never going to be an exact science, right?
Correct, but I'm more interested in how we go about evaluating talent, because you did mention the media, which we are part of, and much of what we do is trying to share with our audience who are who you need to pay attention to moving forward, which is evaluating talent. And it's so difficult because whatever sport or whatever example you want to throw up, like the classic is, we've talked about NBA, NFL, and how much they suck at drafting quarterbacks. Closer to home, I've been thinking about a lot about how the New Zealand Warriors identify talent, and it's no secret that a lot of players have departed the Warriors, and well, some of them have gone on to better things, some of them haven't, but a lot of players coming through the Warriors system have not contributed at a high level for the NRL New Zealand Warriors, which just goes back to evaluating talent. Like, how are you evaluating your best players? And a fantastic example of this is Isaiah Papali'i. He was a superstar coming through under 20s, and, he was a monster for Mags, first 15. I think he was contender for the junior Kiwis, which is under 20s, while he was still playing first 15 for Mags, which is pretty bonkers. But you look at Isaiah Papali'i's NRL career, and a bit lackluster so far, and that's why the Warriors have released him to join the Parramatta Eels. But it's just trying to figure out, from our perspective, when we're watching sport, how do we come to the conclusion that this is a player who is highly likely to be a factor at the professional level? I've got a couple notes or rules. You definitely don't want to go too young. Anything younger than 16, I don't really pay attention to. And you definitely, same goes for cricket as well, because I'm trying to chuck out young cricketers who I've seen something that tells me that this player can contribute or can move into the Black Caps conversation. So I'm talking a Henry Cooper, for example, who I talk a lot about with the Northern Districts Knights. Everyone's going to say Rachin Ravindra, and that's the standout talent. But when I'm doing my job, I'm thinking, where's the value? Where's the value for the audience to have someone that they know has been recommended or has been highlighted that they can then learn about themselves? And it's just it's an interesting thing, because you don't want, quite often the player who strolls through the junior levels and takes the easy path to the professional setup. They're not always the one that is going to cash in. Some of them are late bloomers. Some of them are coming into this situation from all different perspectives. So I'm just thinking, do you have any guidelines? Do you have any rules for when you're watching football or cricket or whatever sport you want to chuck in? Do you have any imagine, okay, let's put you in a scenario where you're watching the ASB Premiership or whatever sponsor it is, the football Premiership, local talent in Aotearoa, and we know that the pathway in football is that you rise up to be good, too good to play in New Zealand, then you go overseas. So I'm thinking, if I want to learn about footballing prospects, I'm coming to you and I'm thinking, and I'm asking, who are the players that you can see have the ability, the mental fortitude, the personality? Obviously, you don't know just by watching them on the field what their personality and stuff like that is. We're not doing the NBA draft personality quizzes here, but if I want to know what players are going to graduate from the local premiership into a A-League professional system or an international professional club, what kind of things are you looking for in a player that makes you confident that they're going to graduate to that next level? And evaluate talent in a wholesome's not the right word, but just in a good way, as opposed to chucking up, this guy's going to be a superstar, and then he just flops and he's nothing,
Yeah, that's one thing I try never to do, is the whole, going all in on a prospect. You got to give yourself a little bit of a wiggle room, which is kind of the main thing. It's I'll present the facts, but I won't go all out. I will be optimistic about players generally, because I prefer to be that way than the other way around. But I won't necessarily like put expectations on players because it just seen too many examples where it goes one way or it goes the other, or like the guys who do really well were unexpected, the guys who were expected to do well suddenly disappear. Like, there's just too many of those kind of unpredictable stories, and that probably goes back to what I was saying just before as well. Like, that's probably another one I'll chuck in the rule book, is just have that baseline awareness that none of this is predictable or nothing's going to work to your exact like expectations or the schedule, even the timing that you would figure. And football is even trickier still. Like, cricket is a little bit easier because cricket runs on the board and wickets tell you most of what you need to know. Like, if a player consistently does those things, then they're doing something right. You don't have to know what it is. You can watch, like, there are many players you can see who are like, well, he doesn't bowl 135 Ks, doesn't seem to swing the ball a whole lot, moves it maybe a little bit off the seam. Like, you got to be doing something. But it's not a lot of bounce or whatever. I don't see why this player keeps taking wickets, but they keep taking wickets, and that's the bottom line you got to return to. If they're doing something, it's just because you can't figure out what it is. Football is trickier because it's you don't have the statistics that tell you the whole story. If a striker scores a lot of goals or a keeper's making a lot of saves, there are obvious things like that, but how do you judge a midfielder who's not there to keep clean sheets or to score the goals? It's trickier. So like, I was thinking of the example of Sam Sutton, who captained the Wellington Phoenix Academy for a year or two and has just moved on to, he's just signed, like last week, signed a 3-year professional contract. He was the best prospect in the Wellington Phoenix Academy since Kakache made it to the first team. And I was thinking, like, why was that the case? I suppose, like, the fact he's judged as a captain and have played a lot of games at that level from the age of like 15, 16, 17, like, that tells you a lot. Like, that clearly the coaches are rating him, his teammates are rating him, like he's doing something right. That's the kind of thing you can lean back on. If he's being a captain, he's obviously got leadership potential. That's something to be aware of. Like, the players at those youth grades who are given captaincy roles, things like that are just, and you get a feel watching the game of the kind of player who doesn't shy away, who wants to get on the ball, who can like make good quality passes, who's involved in the like a disproportionate amount of the better moves of the game, those kind of things. And generally, I don't know that I watch I watch as much as I can of these kind of games, but I don't know that I need to watch a huge amount to get that kind of feel for a player. And then once I get a little bit of a baseline, like, it's not a personality, but it might as well be like a sporting personality, if you know what I mean, like what they play like. Just get just at least a couple of little like ideas to stick about, like, this player likes to take on defenders or something like that. If I can get something like that, just like a talking point or a note or a couple notes like that, then that's sort of enough. And I kind of try to leave it at that, like, rather than getting into an overanalyst type perspective. Because football's skewed as well, because you got, like, think about the popularity of like the FIFA games or Football Manager, where you look at the things and like you look at the player profiles and it'll tell you shooting 19 out of 20, ball control 16 out of 20, speed 12, or maybe he's a little bit slow. Like, those kind of things, like, you look at Football Manager will give you very specific and those things are very well scouted, like to the point where actual clubs use Football Manager databases to help them with transfers sometimes. Like, that, it's not that those are wrong, but it's also like, in reality, when you're watching a game, you can't break a player's abilities down in that level. Like, you can't put numerical value on something that happens kind of, just, I don't even know how to describe this properly. Like, it's a natural flowing, uncategorizable kind of thing. How the sport unfolds, how players, well, you can get tendencies, but you can't get like specific numerical factors. Those stuff is just like ultimately estimates and guesses and whatever. And coming back to the point I made earlier again, is probably the one. It's like another example of probably don't. Like, when you have that kind of, I guess when you do have that baseline of players aren't, like, none of this is an exact science, and then you can have you can find that wiggle room kind of easily, because you can just be like, this stuff is all subject to change, don't overcommit to your opinions because you said this, don't make overcommittable opinions in the first place, like, just, play it as it lies, I suppose. And when it comes to football, I think the biggest thing as well is just the pathways, which don't necessarily reflect who you are as a player. Like, just knowing the right people, being in the right place at the right time to get a contract overseas. Because you mentioned, like, the pathway in New Zealand is easy enough. You try get to the premiership level, and you play really well to where you're one of the better players. But then you go to an overseas club and you're not going to be one of the better players. You're going back to a lower, what do you call it? Like, not a lower standard, but at a higher standard, you're now at a lower level within the squad, and you got to work your way back up from there again. So it's not an easy thing to predict, and getting to the right club makes a lot of difference. Like, going to a club where maybe the manager gets sacked after a couple months and suddenly you're not playing football. Well, an excellent prospect there suddenly becomes a not so excellent prospect for reasons completely out of their control. So just get, like, right place, right time, and those things is just another example why you can't predict or expect or whatever with these things. So, I can't remember how many rules I listed there, but there's keep in mind that it's not an exact science. Give yourself wiggle room by not, like, overcommitting to your opinions, and, then the specific ones that I can't remember what I said. Well, rewind the bloody podcast and listen if you're trying to remember, but I'll throw it back to you on that.
I was just thinking about a New Zealand Warriors scenario where Paul Turner and Dylan Brown are playing for the same Northland under-15 rugby league team, and Paul Turner ends up at the Warriors, and Dylan Brown ends up at the Parramatta Eels. And just like, I'm not saying anything is good or bad. That's just the thought that came to my head strangely. And I was like, what? Like, if you've got two players who both of them have played in the NRL, Paul Turner's just played one game, Dylan Brown's played 2 seasons worth of footy by now. Like, with just the decision-making process between picking between, like, a Dylan Brown and a Paul Turner, like, just how that happens, really interesting. And I don't exactly know anything about that specific example, but you can come to your own conclusions about, like, the recruitment and development ideas, because Dylan Brown made his debut, and he is the best tackling half, best running half by, like, run meters and tackle efficiency and volume of tackles in the NRL. But then again, Dylan Brown went over to the Parramatta Eels, and he was playing SG ball in the Eels system. He was playing under-20s in the Eels system, whereas Paul Turner, this was before the Warriors had established their SG ball under-18 team, so he wasn't afforded that luxury, but maybe he was with the Rabbitohs then, I don't know. But it's just all of that's very convoluted, but I was just wondering, like, that's pretty interesting how two halves playing in the same under-15 rep team are, like, decided upon by the NRL clubs. But I think the big idea that you highlighted there, that is the most important thing when talking about this stuff, is the fit and the situation that you're going to as a young player. And that is, I reckon that is far more influential, far more important than the player themselves. I believe that if your success as a individual early in your career, whatever sport really, is largely dependent on the team and the environment that you are in. And I just thinking off the top of my head again with the Warriors example, Sean Johnson came into the Warriors, and there was a certain level of experience. It just seemed like a good combination for Sean Johnson to enter the NRL. Whereas if you put Sean Johnson in other Warriors teams, I don't think he's starting, like his first 5 years of his career are the same as they were. And let alone like if you're a youngster coming into a Melbourne Storm team or a Sydney Roosters team, like if you put Joey Manu in a different club, he might not be one of the best centers. So there's I think there's the player is responsible for their talent and their career maybe later on. Like that's when you say, oh, this player doesn't have it. Like in evaluating talent, this is my process. I'm thinking like, okay, after a few years, it's up to the player, and it's whether the player has the mindset, the attributes that make a consistent professional athlete. But I think earlier in the career of a professional, it is so much more dependent on the club, the team, the coach, the environment. And that just goes back to like teams and clubs taking the piss with how they operate. Like if you're a club and you're not creating that environment, you're not getting the best juice out of that young prospect. You're not getting them performing at a high level in a professional environment. And that sucks for you and your club, but it's the responsibility of you and your club. And then you're going to watch that player leave your club and get better somewhere else because your club didn't invest time, effort, energy, resource into building an environment where these players can, in creating the best possible fit for that player. Like, it goes back to where the coach wants to use the young player positionally, what kind of role they have. Because quite often the coach just is all over the place with how they debut a player, how they bring them into the professional leagues. And the more I think about evaluating talent, the more I think that it is far more important to explore the scenario they are entering as a youngster. Because another idea to finish this little rant on was there's the Latrell Mitchell podcast that Dean and Kemp did, Bloke in a Bar. Obviously, Dean and Kemp from the glorious days of the Warriors. And he interviewed Latrell Mitchell. It was pretty interesting. But Latrell Mitchell was saying that, like, how he came into Sydney Roosters, like, he had all the talent, but he also had Mitchell Orbison guiding him on how to be a professional. He had all sorts of leaders in a club that was, like, there to support him, but it was a balance of, like, Latrell Mitchell was also relaying the idea that he is Latrell Mitchell, that his talent is his talent, and that's what drove him to push forward and pursue like a further opportunity. But if you go backwards, earlier in his career at the Roosters, he was like Joey Manu. He was coming into a very supportive, favorable situation to blossom. And yeah, just it's so. Because when you're evaluating talent, you're saying this player has it or they don't have it. And there's so many other, like whether they're a late bloomer, whether they have like a little chance, like there's so many layers to that idea, but quintessentially that's what you're saying. But the focus of that discussion never goes to, okay, this player has this skill set and they have this potential. What is their situation like at their current club, team, whatever it is? I think that is the most overlooked factor when assessing younger players.
Yeah, spot on, and that goes both ways. Like, there's players who do extremely well in a fortuitous situation and then don't do as well when maybe they leave that situation, when things aren't so well defined or whatever. And then there's also players who are just in a bad spot who struggle and get written off and told that they're not good enough, and maybe they don't even get another opportunity, which is harsh, or maybe they go and get that opportunity after work up, and then suddenly, just in a better place, they're a much better player, and people act like it's this crazy thing that they've like made this incredible improvement over this short space of time. And it's like, well, maybe they were always this good and weren't able to play to this level. Like, you see a lot of stories like that in I think rugby league in particular, but it also a lot of what you're saying there sounded very NFL to me too, in the way that they work. And sometimes a player just fits a certain type of playing and not. And there's two different types of evaluation as well. There's evaluation from like our perspective, from the outside, just wanting to see the best for a player and whatever. But with the way a club evaluates a player isn't necessarily, with the young players, when you're talking about like multi-year things, it's pretty similar. But when you get to like specific, how is this guy going to fit this season? It's not necessarily about how is this player going to unlock their best ability. It's how is this player's best ability help us to win games right now. And that might not be playing in the position they're expected to or whatever. It's little things like that as well that come into the mix. With like, and I think the Isaiah Papali'i one that you mentioned earlier is a pretty good example to swing back to too, because his thing with like not cracking it at the Warriors, it wasn't that he wasn't a big talent coming up through the grades. Like, that wasn't the problem. The problem is that he got to the first grade and didn't kick on, didn't continue that growth. And then like, in consideration of all the things we just talked about, then you got to wonder if maybe the club didn't get the best out of him, or maybe the club were overrating certain aspects of, like, the Warriors have certainly done that in the past, where they've had a really strong youth system full of players who didn't come to first grade and kick on for various reasons. It's probably a couple essays worth of stuff to talk about there that we don't need to do on this particular podcast right now, but like, many factors involved there. I forgot my train of thought now, but I'll wherever we're going with this, you can take the baton.
Because when you're talking about Isaiah Papali'i, I was just trying to find whether Isaiah Papali'i and Marata Niokori played in the same under-20s team for the Warriors. I think they probably did, but I just can't find that confirmation straight off the top here. But Marata Niokori, there may have been a point where the Warriors had to decide between Isaiah Papali'i and Marata Niokori. Marata Niokori is more of a edge forward, and he played a bit of center while he was at the Warriors. But he was he was captain of the under-20s team at some point, and he was you could see that he was a well-regarded junior, and then he goes to the Parramatta Eels. They pick him up out of under-20s, and this year Marata Niokori was amazing, and he built on a very solid season last season. As you're alluding to with Papali'i, like the development season to season getting better, that was Marata Niokori, and they came from a similar place at the Warriors under-20s, and Isaiah Papali'i moved into NRL footy, and he seems to have gone the other direction. So the curveball here is that Papali'i's going to the Eels where Niokori is, so there's every chance that Isaiah Papali'i may blossom from this point, because that's what I've seen with Marata Niokori. That's what I've seen with Dylan Brown, is that they just get better and better and better at the Eels, although the Eels don't necessarily get better and better and better, which is a bit weird. Another little Papali'i note is I'm thinking of Jazz Tavanga, because I've got this theory, a bit of an idea that the Warriors are looking for bigger bodies. So they're bringing in Kane Evans, they're bringing in Ben Murdoch-Masila, and maybe some of their junior stuff moved away from that. There's a balance. You don't want to just sign the biggest dude on the field of a under-18s game, or even worse, the biggest dude on the field at an under-14s game or whatever. But that's where I see what is happening under Nathan Brown and Peter O'Sullivan. Maybe a bit of Phil Gould, but I don't think he has much influence on these things. Right now, the Warriors are pivoting towards getting a bigger team. Like, everyone just thinks the Warriors are a big team because they've got Ken Mamala on the wing. But you look at a lot of their forwards, they're more similar to an Isaiah Papali'i stature. So I think that the Warriors are moving bigger, but then you got someone like Jazz Tavanga, who just toiled away, wasn't necessarily like one of the best juniors at the Warriors, but the Warriors did a great job in identifying what Tavanga did really well, and now we're seeing Tavanga progress and develop. And I don't know about you, Wildcard, but when I watch the Warriors, Tavanga is one of my most not necessarily entertaining. He's one of my more favorite players to watch at the Warriors, and I think he had a great year this year. So it's very weird and all over the place, as we've kind of alluded to numerous times. But yeah, it was just interesting to see what happens specifically with the Warriors and how they're evaluating talent. Because I can also say that right now the Warriors have a lot of their best talent is just playing the best level that they can, whether that's first 15 rugby union and or SG ball. So I think moving forward, the Warriors are going to be in a better position with their younger talent, because instead of, a lot of the juniors at the Warriors didn't have that super high level relative to their age group that all the Australian clubs have. Now that's changing, because if you are playing SG ball, you're only playing SG ball for like 10 weeks at the start of the year, and you're playing against other NRL clubs, but then after that, you can go play first 15 rugby, and you're playing rugby at a high level. So either way, you're playing at a high level, competing against the best kids your age, and I think that is going to put the Warriors in a better position moving forward. But as I'm talking about that, other than the SG ball, Isaiah Papali'i was, he would have been playing rep rugby league all through the juniors and first 15 rugby for Mag. So I'm just talking myself into a whirlwind here, Wildcat.
Well, on Jazz Tavanga, point to be added there is one of the reasons he was so good this season is because he found a role that suited him, and the Warriors sort of adapted to that role, which was like him as that kind of that sort of how would you describe it? Like a playmaking lock? Not really that, but I guess the extra mobile middle forward type role that you're seeing a little bit more around the NRL. Like, it has been a trend. It's not like the Warriors invented this, but from being a guy who played a lot of dummy half, for example, to coming in to play this role, I don't know, he just seems like a very good example as well of someone who was up and down and had a few injuries as well, but someone who as a prospect was kind of on the fence until they found that role which suited them so well, and now suddenly looks like he through the last couple months of the season, he was one of the Warriors, not only one of their best players, but one of their key players as well.
Yeah, and that goes back to the fit,
Exactly.
Whereas Papali'i was a bit more we'll put you on the edge, but you're probably a bit small and a bit slow for the edge, and then we'll put you on the middle, and you're a bit small for the middle, and it's like, oh my gosh, where are you going to play? We will take this idea, Wildcard, over to some Plunket Shield cricket, because there are, if I'm applying this same discussion, which we don't need to do for the Plunket Shield, but we can just take it a bit further. Kyle Jamieson is having a monstrous start to the Plunket Shield, 15 wickets, average at 8.8, 2 fifers, a hat-trick, on the back of his amazing work at all levels, last summer, or earlier this year to be more specific. As a prospect coming up, everyone would have seen Kyle Jamieson immensely tall, super tall. But as I've said in this podcast and many different times, the first thing that was noticeable about Kyle Jamieson was what he did with the ball. Yes, he's tall, and that's going to be attractive from a second coming of Neil Wagner type of vibe. That is extremely present throughout the Plunket Shield Wildcard. I don't know if you've caught many of the various highlights, but it seems like these teams are falling back into the Neil Wagner plan rather eagerly, but they don't have bowlers who are Neil Wagner. So that's where I see a lot of sixes hit, is just run-of-the-mill seam bowler going around the wicket with 3 men out on the leg side, but they have none of Neil Wagner's, not even skill set, because it's like more his stature as well. Like he's a shorter bloke, skiddy and whatnot. But Kyle Jamieson moves the ball, and I don't know what it is, wildcard, but there's some big swing happening, big movement, like in swing, out swing. For Kyle Jamieson, it's in swing, out swing, and bounce. But that's from a cricket perspective, it's okay. You might be the fast bowler, you might be the tall bowler, but you're only going to progress to the higher levels if you do that while also moving the ball, swinging the ball, seaming the ball, and just having a greater skill set that is going to trouble batsmen at higher levels as well. So I head down that route just to set up our little Plunket Shield segment here, wildcard. Kyle Jamieson is leading all wicket takers. Devon Conway, I mean, these are the two blokes of New Zealand cricket right now, wildcard. Kyle Jamieson was the hottest thing last summer, based on what he did for the Black Caps. And then Devon Conway was the leading run scorer across all three formats last summer in domestic cricket. And here they are, both leading their respective rankings.
Which is, like, outstandingly incredible for Devon Conway, because Wellington have been shocking. Like, their batting lineup has been absolutely terrible so far. They haven't been getting runs from the openers coming in ahead of them. Like, they've had a couple nice little middle order scrapaways, but they've been pretty bad, and yet Devon Conway is leading the overall run charts. And it's like, I was shocked to see that at first, considering, like, I mean, he hasn't scored 100, a few others, like, several others have, but at the same time, like, looking back at the Wellington scorecards, and even while their team was getting skittled in a couple of those games, he top scored in their first three innings and would have top scored in their fourth if not for it's Jamie Gibson, isn't it, scoring, batting away at the end there. And I can't remember if he got to 100 or not. I think he might have. So, like, Conway had actually been delivering for a team that's struggling, which means that those runs are even, like, tougher runs than they appear. Like, he's the top run scorer, having scored a lot of runs in, like, adverse conditions. So, yeah, mate, fair play to him. And Kyle Jamieson, like, I mentioned last week how I had him as my player of the round for the first round. Then he goes and takes a hat trick and plays even better the next time around. It's like, he like, 3 weeks ago before the season started, I would have said, and I think we did talk about this actually, like, he's sort of, what he did for the Black Caps late last year in a couple ODIs, a couple test matches, was probably enough to put him in, like, majority of your Black Cap squads, but maybe not necessarily first 11. But then with what he's done recently, and it's not just the numbers, it's the eye test as well. Like, just, as you say, he gets bounced obviously, but he swings the ball both ways. A lot of his wickets this season have come bowled as well. So he's bowling directly and still beating the beating the bat, beating the pad. Like, it's, he's at a level where I haven't seen a bowler at domestic standard, like in Plunket Shield, bowling consistently like this well for, at least a couple of years. And going back to, like, his last, where are we? I whipped up his cricket info thing. His last 4 first class matches, so 2 tests against India and 2 Plunket Shield games. His first innings bowling stats are 4 for 39, 5 for 45, 5 for 39, and 5 for 41. Like, that's what he's done in the first bowling innings of his last 4 first class games. That includes 2 games where he's bowling to, like, Virat Kohli and stuff. That's incredible. Like, that goes far beyond anything else of, like, just the many things we're talking about and how you evaluate players. Like, there's a point at which you don't have to evaluate players because, like, it becomes just a fact. Like, it's not even a question now. It's like he would have to be in your Black Caps starting, like, first 11 if you I mean, it gets tricky if you want to work in how you're going to go with with spinners and whatnot, but like he's undeniably now in every Black Caps test squad on this kind of form, and like you probably want him to be playing, which has got me wondering, like, what does that mean for someone like Tim Southee, for example, who's actually been very good in test matches in the last couple of years. Like, and I guess the guy who suffers the most is the fella who just broke his hand taking throwdowns from a fella named Peter Fulton, who was also about the same height as Kyle Jamieson. Matt Henry, who's now out for about 6 weeks with that. He broke his thumb against Australia A, and now apparently he broke the other thumb getting throwdowns in the nets. And I don't know, but Peter Fulton maybe shouldn't, because he was the Black Caps batting coach for a while, and maybe there is an issue when you've got a 6'7" guy giving you throwdowns, and I don't know, but I guess that's just solidarity of the tall fellas, eh? Like Peter Fulton giving Kyle Jamison's career one last little boost, and Kyle Jamieson did sort of. This hasn't come out of the blue with him. Like, I've had to think about this a little bit more because it feels like it has. It feels like he's had just this roller coaster last 12 months or whatever. But there was a point, like, he took a 9-fer for Canterbury one time, didn't he? And the reason he didn't kick on there is because he got injured. Like, I think he missed quite a lot of time with, was it a back or a knee or, something like that. Like he had a long injury layoff that sort of ended his time there with Canterbury before he moved back to Auckland. That's probably the only reason he didn't do this 12 months earlier as well.
We did our niche case versus Kyle Jamieson back in maybe early 2017, if I can remember off the top. And that, yeah, definitely. And that's like I started seeing his movement with the ball as soon as he started playing, which was years ago, but it's been a massive ordeal. Like when you're trying to bowl and you're that tall, you're going to have injuries throughout your career, and that's kind of what he had to go through. I just saw a wildcard, Colin de Grandhomme, no wickets in 28 overs of Plunket Shield cricket, which surprised me because I mean, it's a seam bowling paradise around Aotearoa at the moment, and perhaps the dude who you'd think would benefit the most of juicy October, November wickets around Aotearoa, Colin de Grandhomme, but he hasn't taken a wicket. To further your point about building a Black Cap seam attack, which Colin de Grandhomme note, I won't put any weight to it just yet. It's just something that has happened in the first 2 games of Plunket Shield, and that might flow on. I don't know, but it is a note. The best spinner is Brad Schmullian, the underground king of Plunket Shield New Zealand cricket. He is 14th in wickets. 15th, sorry. So 14 seamers have taken at least 6 wickets in the first 2 games. There is no Ajaz Patel. He has not been cited in Plunket Shield cricket. He is battling an injury by all accounts. You mentioned Tim Southee. So are you thinking Tim Southee's in danger? Because the way I'm thinking, like, Matt Henry's, his one broken thumb earlier last summer opened the door for Kyle Jamieson, and his other broken thumb this summer is going to keep that door open for Kyle Jamieson. So are you thinking like I'm thinking like a Kyle Jamieson, Tim Southee, Trent Boult, Colin de Grandhomme, Neil Wagner. And I think if Ajaz Patel isn't fit and healthy, based on what we've seen from the Black Caps previously, they seem rather unexcited to pick a spinner to play in the 11. And if they're not going to do that, you have to chuck Kyle Jamieson into the bowling attack with what he's doing at the moment. It just depends on that view around spin bowling in New Zealand. The weird note here, Wildcard, when we're talking about Kyle Jamieson, is that he's taken 15 wickets. Canterbury's Will Williams has taken 12 wickets. And I'll just compare their first-class records here, Wildcard. Will Williams is 28 years old. He has played 27 first-class games, and he has a bowling average of 23.68. Kyle Jamieson, 25 years old, 29 first-class games and a bowling average of 23.85. So Jamieson has played 2 more first-class games, and he's got a slightly worse average, 0.85 versus Williams's 0.68. So you've got one bowler in Kyle Jamieson, who is the hottest cricket thing in Aotearoa right now, but then you've got Will Williams, who has done exactly the same thing in first-class cricket, in Plunket Shield cricket, over a... Williams has been later on the scene, because obviously Kyle Jamieson missed like large portions of multiple seasons due to injury, so that's why he has only played 29 games or whatever it was. Williams has played his games more concentrated more recently, but they have the exact same bowling record, and Williams is 3 wickets behind Jamieson in the Plunket Shield right now. He is extremely economical, but if we go back to like evaluating talent, Williams doesn't appear to bowl overly quick, because Cameron Fletcher, the Canterbury wicketkeeper, is always standing. Not always, because Williams opens the bowling and Fletcher is back, but then at some point Fletcher, like every game, comes up to the stumps at some point. I don't know exactly what point it is. So that tells me Williams isn't bowling overly fast. That's obvious. And Williams doesn't appear to be like... He's not moving the ball more than Jamieson. I think I broke down a few little notes of his action in the on the blogs, so read that. Maybe Williams has like a front-on action that does allow for right arm in swing, pushing it across left-handers into right-handers. He has this weird style where his bowling arm goes like... So for yourself, Wildcard, and the listeners, imagine a right-arm seam bowler. They jump, they plant their right foot with their toes pointing down the pitch, as opposed to their toes pointing towards the boundary, or like at a right angle. So Williams comes in, toes pointing forward. He lands his front leg, his left leg, and his bowling arm is to the left of his front leg, if you know what I'm saying. Like, it's over behind the front leg, and then it comes out. It looks really awkward, and if you're doing it at home, it would feel really awkward. There's some weird flexibility movement that happens in Williams's action, and that's the best I could find as like a X factor of what Williams does. Like, there's no other notable signs that are like, holy shit, Will Williams, he's got exactly the same record as Kyle Jamieson, but it's like Will Williams isn't as dominant as Jamieson. It's very strange, but I'm trying to figure that out. That's my next little mission. I've done my little figure out what the All Blacks are doing, still on that journey. That thought experiment worked out in my favor. Now I'm just kind of figuring out, like, what's Will Williams doing? Because even to elaborate another step, Sean Solier is 3rd in wickets. So you mentioned the Wellington batting lineup and Wellington just not being very good at the moment. Auckland have 2 seamers in the top 3 wicket takers. 3 bowlers have taken at least 10 wickets. Sean Solier, Will Williams, and Kyle Jamieson. So Sean Solier is opening the batting for Auckland, and he's taking 11 wickets at an average of 8.27, which is better than Kyle Jamieson. But with Sean Solier, well, I shouldn't say, but just with Sean Solier, I can see that he is, like, I can just watch him bowl and I can see what works well for him. I can see perhaps why he is having success. There's just like a look to his bowling. You can see that he's controlled, but he's got a very like powerful action, and he can move the ball. Williams I'm still struggling to see what Will Williams is doing that is really difficult for batsmen to handle, because once again, he's got the exact same record as Kyle Jamieson. He has had a fantastic start to the season, but why? Why?
Yeah, also, why did his parents with the last name Williams name him William is also another mystery there. If he was like, it is William, eh? It's not like Will or something like that. Where are we? Yeah, William Salter Austin Williams. So if he was like William Salter Austin Williams the third or something, that would make some sense, because then you could at least say there's like a heritage thing. But a little confusing. I was just watching his highlights on the New Zealand cricket app as well as you're saying that, to get a look at like his action. And yeah, it does look like he sort of drops his left arm down quite early, where you normally the coaches will tell you to keep that left elbow nice and high so you can like swing it down in like a wheel formation as you bring the right arm through to give you like that thrust and momentum or whatever. He seems to drop it a little earlier. He's very like elbows as well when he's running in. But I mean, something's working for him, because that was he got what did he get in that second 5 for 58 in the second innings against Wellington there, which was bowling towards a victory as well. So like pretty bloody impressive numbers there, including the wicket of Conway, which was one of the ones I was watching. Devon Conway out for 94, like slashing at one, hitting it to gully. Apparently there was a very good catch there that by Tom Latham in the gully / wider slip caught in, which wasn't caught on camera because it's outside of the range. But Devon Conway then just stands there for ages, like adjusts his glove, takes it off, looks back across. Everyone is like, all the Canterbury players have run off celebrating, and then he puts his bat down and just leans up against it like he's doing the old like W.G. Grace thing. Like, you know, there's a famous story where W.G. Grace gets out early, turns to the umpire and says, "Look here, buddy, the people, you see all these people in the crowd, they've come here to watch me bat, they haven't come here to watch you umpire, so I suggest you take that finger down." Like, the clip ends about 25 seconds gone and he's still just standing there not looking like he's going to walk off. It's probably not used to being out just short of 100, that fella. He tends to cash in. But Will Williams, that was his first fifer, was the point I was going to make. The first fifer he's got in 47 innings of first-class cricket, and yet he has an average of 23.68. Like, Kyle Jamieson cashes in. Like, we meant, like, he took that 9 for against, back in the Canterbury days. He's got a couple fifers already this season. I mean, he got a bloody hat-trick the other day. He cashes in. Like, that's why you get a low average, is because you get those innings where you get a whole lot. So for Will Williams to have an average under 24 with one fifer suggests that there aren't too many games that he plays where he isn't taking wickets. Like, he must be chipping away 1, 2, 3 most innings that he bowls in. So maybe this is another talent evaluation thing. Like, he's obviously doing something right, eh?
Definitely. If I had to guess, I'd say very stump to stump, a lot of movement, seam, swing, predominantly in swing to right-handers, if I'm thinking about Will Williams. And come to think of it, I did say that I can see a bit easier what Sean Solier is doing with the ball. I would say that they are, like, if there was a bowler who is most similar to Will Williams, it is Sean Solier. And if there's a bowler who is most similar to Sean Solier, it is Will Williams, because they're both very front on with how they approach the crease and then through the crease. So maybe in these conditions, that's just suited to what they're doing. Because they're, like, front on action, you're leaning, you're making it easier to bowl in swing to right-handers. Side on action, you're making it easier to bowl out swing to right-handers. That's what makes Kyle Jamieson even more amazing, because he's moving the ball both ways. Right? Like, that last ball of the hat-trick, ginormous in-swinger. Like, is that just happening because there's reverse swing? Is that just happening because there's Kyle Jamieson can manipulate his action to bowl induckers? Like, it's all pretty interesting. And on the back of the, like, Matt Henry Black Caps situation, in conjunction with mainly Kyle Jamieson. I think there's the same brewing feeling I get with the all-rounders here, Wildcard. Not specifically because, like, we've just had Doug Bracewell hit a century, Daryl Mitchell hit a century, but they've also taken wickets. So Doug Bracewell, for example, his century, like, he had a high score of 102 and he scored 122 runs. So I don't want to, like, big up his average. Same thing with Daryl Mitchell, high score of 103, total runs of 129. So I'll just say that they have both scored centuries and they have both only batted twice, which is pretty good. Then you look at the bowling. Daryl Mitchell, 8 wickets at 15. Doug Bracewell, 9 wickets at 19. So you've got Doug Bracewell might be a bit more of a seamer than a batsman. Daryl Mitchell might be a bit more of a batsman than a seamer, but they are both all-rounders. And I don't know, all I can say without any, like, firm roots in this idea is I just feel there's a situation brewing there with regards to the Black Caps and how they build their team moving forward. Because if there's any slip up from Colin de Grandhomme, it would have to be like something would have to happen. Like, Colin de Grandhomme would have to be extra bad, because I do think that the current Black Caps setup, unless it's an injury, under Kane Williamson, there is the vibe of, like, these are our guys and we know what they do and we're going to select them. We're going to give them extra chances. So I'm not saying Doug Bracewell is better than Colin de Grandhomme right now. I'm not saying Daryl Mitchell should be there ahead of Colin de Grandhomme right now. I'm just saying this is a situation that is brewing. If Colin de Grandhomme goes the wrong way and Doug Bracewell and Daryl Mitchell go the right way, I just feel like that is brewing, because we've seen both Doug Bracewell and Daryl Mitchell have really good starts to the summer with bat and ball, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, Doug Bracewell's bowled a couple of absolute, like, peaches throughout. Like, you roll through some of his highlights through the first couple of games. He's bowling very well, and that's chucking him back into a mixture, because he is a dude with a lot of international experience as well. So, like, and there's, well, I mean, I got to take a second as well to acknowledge the 100 that he scored, because that was just incredible. Because he came in, let me see if I can find the thing. He, somewhere, because he came in with his team, I don't even know what position he batted. This, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so he came in at 8, which meant they must have been 6 down, 6 for 106. They were then 7 for 106, because Brad Schmullian got out at the other end straight away. So they're 7 for 106 effectively when he came in. Like, he watched a guy get out, but he didn't obviously do anything. Needing about 280 to win. And he had a couple, like, 5 6s, 7 4s along the way, but he also batted at a strike rate of 74. So it's not like he was just doing Nathan Astle, got to go for it, incredible slogging away, like, kind of innings. He legitimately, like, batted with the tail. Old JFA Field, whatever his first name is, faced 92 deliveries, coming in at 9. Ray Toole even he got 6 not out of 34, so it's not like Bracewell was just protecting him from the strike the whole time either. Like, he genuinely batted with the tail, a proper innings. The bad ball went to the fence or over the fence, but, like, nothing crazy, nothing reckless, and they got so close. Auckland ended up winning by 25 runs, but Doug Bracewell legitimately, like, that innings wasn't just game was gone, or that, like, Daryl Mitchell's, for example, was also a very good 100, but he was batting to put the game away. Like, Wellington were well behind in that game. Canterbury were looking to set a very big total. In this case, like, Doug Bracewell was batting against an inevitable defeat, and he very nearly pulled off an absolute miracle to get them. So that was an amazing innings. The thing about, it's like there's 2 notes to make on things we've already talked about that I was scribbling down here. One is another aspect of Will Williams' bowling very well is I think you can't also ignore like the unit that he's bowling within, where like Ed Nuttall is a very good, experienced, reliable first-class bowler, same as Will Williams is proving to be. Daryl Mitchell, obviously, is a dude who knows exactly what he's doing. Fraser Sheet got his first 5-wicket bag. He's a bit of a younger fella who also has a slightly, what would you say, slightly unorthodox action, but seems to, be 5 for 25 in the first innings there is pretty bloody excellent. And they've played Wellington twice. This doesn't affect Will Williams' career figures. This is just this season. But they've played Wellington twice, once in Wellington, once at, I suppose it would have been, Hagley Oval, in fact, in Christchurch. So it doesn't take much to figure that those would have been two very good, like, seam bowling conditions as well, which, that doesn't, we're talking about 26, 27 games or whatever with 27 games with Will Williams. So that's not to mention his, not to affect his career statistics, but that does flow on into what you're saying before about the Black Caps and spin bowling, because that was what happened against India, wasn't it? I don't think Ajaz Patel played. They just picked Kyle Jamieson as an extra seamer, and Kyle Jamieson took 9 wickets or something like that. He did very, very well, scored some runs as well. I don't think they would drop Sim Southee, and I don't think they should, but I do expect certain, I think that's the kind of thing you would hear from, your mainstream Kiwi sporting media is maybe, is throwing up the idea that Tim Southee might be in trouble, when I don't think he would be. If anything, Colin de Gronholm would be in more trouble maybe, and you just bat Kyle Jamieson at, what would he be, 8? 7 or 8, depends where BJ Walling is. But, I mean, considering what we've just been saying about, the seam bowling dominance in the first 2 rounds of the Plunket Shield, considering that the West Indies are coming here first, considering that we'll be playing test matches before the end of the year, I don't think the grass on these wickets is going to burn off quite in time. It'll be a little bit better. It'll be drier conditions by the time those tests start. But I also don't really see what, I love watching spin bowling, so it's one of those things, and I want to see Ajaz Patel get more opportunities. But if he's not playing at the moment, and he's not going to be getting in those reps ahead of the first test series of the summer, and if it's still likely to be seam bowling friendly conditions against a touring West Indies side, there's absolutely no reason not to just pick 5 seamers, including de Gronholm. I'd actually be really surprised if they didn't do that, especially considering there's prior form there as well to do exactly that kind of thing. It's just smart selection at that point, because that's the team that's going to most likely get you the victory.
It definitely will. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. And at the end of the day, they're just trying to win games of cricket. They're not necessarily... it's not their duty to develop spin bowlers. Their duty is to win games of test cricket. And given the current landscape, unless maybe Ish Sodhi, he took a couple wickets in this game, maybe he pops up and he dominates for a couple of games, puts himself in the mix. Mitchell Santner's in the IPL, where he's played a whopping 2 games, so shout out to him. He might come back and prove to be a factor as well. Unless something changes with those 3 spinners, defeating the West Indies, especially in that first test, Kyle Jamieson's going to take some first innings wickets. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. Might get a bit tricky if you're opening with Tom Blundell at the moment, though, wildcard, because this is something we are keeping tabs on. Tom Blundell, 28 runs at an average of 7. And his opening partner, Rachin Ravindra, 35 runs at an average of 8.75. So neither Tom Blundell or Rachin Ravindra has done anything in the start of the Plunket Shield. And yeah, we're keeping track on Tom Blundell. He is one of the more interesting, not because of anything he's doing. He's just someone in a very interesting position, with how he's used at the Black Caps, how he's used with Wellington Firebirds. This is the first time Tom Blundell has been used as an opener for the Wellington Firebirds because of the fact that he is the Black Caps opener, and that has resulted in no runs. How are you, what kind of leash are you giving Tom Blundell here, wildcard? Every chance, he's only going to have to make, one score in 2 games of Plunket Shield cricket to boost his stocks, and he might not even have to do anything to boost his stocks because the Black Caps will have faith in him. But, how are you assessing that situation, considering it's another game down and everything is the same?
And the other factor is that if he continues to average 7 runs, if he scores another 28 runs at an average of 7 in the next 2 rounds as well, and still gets picked to face the West Indies in those, I think it's 2 tests, we're probably still going to win those test matches. This isn't a situation like going to Australia where, ironically, actually, despite the point that I'm trying to make here, where players who were out of form, specifically the previous opener in Jeet Raval, was exposed by the fact that we were also getting thrashed by an extremely good Australian team in their ideal circumstances playing at home. Despite that, where Tom Blundell actually came in and scored a pretty incredible century there, he's not going to be exposed if he struggles against the West Indies, because I expect that if he gets out cheaply, Kane Williamson's going to come in and score a lot of runs, then Ross Taylor's going to come in after him and score a lot of runs. Presumably Henry Nicholls, though, he hasn't played yet, has he, Henry Nicholls? I think he might be slightly injured as well, I'm not sure. And then, more than anything, regardless of who scores the runs, I'd be pretty confident that we're going to take a lot of wickets. I mean, Neil Wagner takes wickets regardless. Trent Boult, I think I'm right in saying, hasn't played a lot in the... Oh, has he played a lot? He was the only one playing IPL, wasn't he, for a while there? I think he did take some wickets. And Tim Southey got a 5 for the other day, and Kyle Jamison's taking wickets for fun right now. So the West Indies are going to struggle to set any kind of totals against us with the form some of these bowlers are in. It's not really going to matter. But having said that, we still want the optimum Black Caps 11, because tougher tests will follow. There is a test championship. We've got to play some difficult away series over the next 24 months. And I am struggling to see how Tom Blundell is going to last in this role. So just remember, it comes to a point of how in the Black Caps selecting team is traditionally very conservative when it comes to making these decisions. But how long of a leash do you give him? How long do you persevere if he doesn't score? Will these last 2 Plunket Shield games be the making? And I agree with you, if he gets 100 in one of these last 4 innings, he's probably safe. But if he doesn't, if he continues on the way he's gone, and it hasn't been very pretty to watch some of his dismissals either. They're not the kind of dismissals you want to see from a test match opener, fiddling at wide ones and that kind of thing. A lot of getting caught behind the wicket and whatnot. How long of a leash do you give him? How much of a... are you even setting little targets of where, from a Gavin Larson perspective, is he setting little targets of what he wants to see from Blundell, or is it purely a matter of he was the incumbent, so he stays on? I don't know. And then the option B as well, or question B to consider, is if you are going to drop him, you need to know who you're going to pick to replace him. And I'm not sure that's particularly clear at the moment either. I mean, Devon Conway's not opening in Plunket Shield, whereas and neither is Will Young, who have been the 2 next man up kind of batsmen in recent times. So I'm not sure that situation is very clear either, which is just adding up to a general kind of murky bowl of soup.
Well, old mate Henry Cooper's hit 2 half-centuries in 2 games. He's averaging 51. Last season, Henry Cooper averaged 49, and he was second to Devon Conway. So there's a young opener there scoring runs that the Black Caps definitely won't pick.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, is young players. I mean, we talked about start of the podcast, nice long chat there about assessing young players in various sports. Cricket tends to be a late bloomers kind of sport anyway. And the Black Caps take that to an excessive degree. Like if you look at the contracted players, I think there's about 2 of them who are under the age of 28 at the moment. So Henry Cooper at age, what would he be, 24, something like that? He would definitely be a bit of a bolter, despite the fact that he has multiple seasons at this point of like consistently delivering. And also I just, check out again with the old analyzing players, the eye test factor. He does bat a lot like a right-handed Tom Latham. Like I can see a lot of that in the way he plays too. So I certainly think he could do it. I certainly don't think they'll pick him.
He is 27 years old, so he's almost at that 28.
Oh, so he's almost there.
He's right for the picking. Henry Cooper, back-to-back centuries to finish last season. So that means centuries in the last 2 games, and then he has started this season with 2 half-centuries. So that's basically 4 Plunket Shield games with a 50-plus score for Henry Cooper. Nothing crazy there. Wildcard, I just ran some numbers, and we'll finish our Plunket Shield discussion here. Leo Carter may be the best 6-hitter in Aotearoa.
Didn't he hit 36 off and over in the Super Smash last year? Was that him?
So, right, he did that, right? He did that. That was him. Big Donnie Leo Carter. Looks like every normal left-hander. He doesn't look like Doug Bracewell. He doesn't look like Tim Southey. He doesn't look like Colin de Gronholm. He just looks like a normal, reasonably sized human batsman. Because those other dudes are also all-rounders. Leo Carter's just a batsman. He has hit 5 sixes in the Plunket Shield thus far. And 3 players have hit 5 sixes. They are Leo Carter, Doug Bracewell, and Colin de Gronholm. No surprises there. All up, Leo Carter has hit 22 sixes in 30 first-class games. Well, how about this, Wildcard? You mentioned his 6 sixes. In 2020 cricket, Leo Carter has hit 15 sixes in 30 games in 2020 cricket. In first-class cricket, he has hit 22 sixes in 30 games. So he has hit more sixes. Obviously, there's more time and more deliveries to hit more sixes, but that is, in my mind, that is offset by the difference in formats. So T20 cricket, you're trying to hit boundaries all the time. So that's just how I rational it. But Leo Carter has hit more sixes in the same amount of first-class games than he has in T20 games, which is a bit crazy. Either way,
especially when you hit 6 of those 2020 ones in 1 over.
Yes. So he's hit 9 sixes in 29 games, which doesn't read as good. I'm forming an opinion here that Leo Carter is the certified 6-hitter of New Zealand cricket right now. And from that seed, again, talking about evaluating young talent, shout out to Leo Carter. He does have a first-class average of 32.11. That is his best format, is first-class Plunket Shield cricket. But if Leo Carter is the Mr. Certified 6-hitter of Aotearoa cricket, and I'm evaluating a young batsman, to me that feels like the seed for a T20 prospect. So if we're looking forward to any number of the 15 T20 World Cups that are happening in the next 3 years, Leo Carter needs to be viewed as a slugging prospect, because that's what he does. He bangs sixes as well as fours. He's got 201 fours in 30 games. I didn't run stats on that. I might have to write about it and then I'll do a deeper dive. I did run stats on sixes though. So assuming my math is correct, Leo Carter he averages 0.73 sixes per game of first class cricket. So not innings, just game. Tim Southey averages 0.83. so he's a bit better. But we know Timmy deals in 6s. Doug Bracewell, 0.63. So Tim Southey and Doug Bracewell have both played a lot more cricket, and they're kind of in that lower order, all-rounder, bang a couple 6s. That's their job. And Leo Carter is on par with them, if not better. Colin de Grandhomme doesn't have like his first class 6s listed in his Cricinfo profile, but we know Colin de Grandhomme loves to bang a 6 in Test cricket, and his numbers rolled out to be he averages 1.54 6s per test. I'd be very interested to see what his first class numbers are like, but they're not there. But that's kind of the benchmark, is Colin de Grandhomme hitting 6s in Test cricket, bang bang. George Worker, for example, he's a top order, pretty attacking opening batsman. He averages 0.33 6s per game. So I want to dive a bit deeper into that and just lay it out for Leo Carter a bit better, with a bit more clarity around what that is. But fairly interesting there, wildcard, that there is a batsman in Leo Carter who, yes, he hit 6 6s in a Super Smash over last summer, and that was eye-catching. That's the type of shit that shows up on the TVNZ 6 o'clock news. But Leo Carter's like smashing 6s in the Plunket Shield right now. And he's on track with the best sluggers in New Zealand cricket, like of recent years, which is pretty amazing. So shout out Leo Carter, and keep an eye on him, because he looks like he's gonna hit a lot more 6s.
Yeah, not to be confused with Joe Carter from Northern Districts, who's scoring bucket loads of runs. I think he got an unbeaten 146 or something like that in the last game, and also captaining ND. Which, yeah, I don't know a huge lot about him, but seems like he's on right on the brink himself. Speaking of clarity as well, one other thing that I forgot. While thinking about the opener situation, is we are actually going to get some clarity on this ahead of the test team, aren't we? Because there is a couple of West Indies got a couple games late November of there's a 3-day match at Birdseye Oval and then a 4-day match at Birdseye Oval later in the same week. So 2 New Zealand A games ahead of that. And I think that's probably going to be pretty telling as to where selectors are coming from. Because, I remember discussing this a year ago. All the dudes who came, who were the players who came in to do really well just came in full stop when the Black Caps needed extra test players. It was guys like last season, it was guys like Glenn Phillips, Kyle Jamieson, Daryl Mitchell, probably one or two more I can't think of off the top of my head. Tom Blundell actually might have. I can't remember if Tom Blundell played in that or not. But certainly those first 3 all played in the New Zealand A teams that played against England at the start of that summer as well. So they're using the New Zealand A team. It's a pretty new sort of idea as well. Well, not new idea, but a new emphasis on this idea in the last year or two, that they have been putting more of a factor into New Zealand A stuff. And they do seem to be using it in a way of these are the next 11 players. Not just there's 1 or 2 fellas that are prospects getting an extra go or whatever, but that's because they're being lined up for Black Caps duty down the line. They are using it as a Black Caps reserves type team. And we're going to get a couple New Zealand A games before the Test series. So we should get a bit of a glimpse as to who opens there. I watched one of them, when it was at one of the games against England when they played it in Whangarei, and the openers that day were Hamish Rutherford and Rachim Ravindra, and Rutherford got concussed and he got a knock on the head from Jofra Archer, I think, and didn't open in the second innings, and Glenn Phillips just moved up from 3 to open, and I think he scored 100 as well, or that might have been in the first innings, I can't remember, but yeah, that. I also don't think those 2 guys are gonna. For one thing, Hamish Rutherford isn't even opening for Otago at the moment. I don't think it's Anaru Kitchen and what's his name? What is his name? The other opener for Otago?
I think it's Hawkins. Cam Hawkins.
That's it, Cam Hawkins. That's the one. Yeah. So yeah, like that's another. I don't think you're going to see the same two go. Oh, Ravindra might get another go because they like what they've seen in him, and he is clearly he hasn't scored the runs to prove it this season, but he is clearly like an excellent up and coming batsman. But if for example, old mate Henry Cooper's going to get a crack there, I would expect we'll see his name in that New Zealand A team ahead of time if that's genuinely an option. But again, I actually, that's when did I say that was the 21st of November is the first game. Because there's two, I don't know if they'll do different squads, or maybe the second New Zealand A team will be a little more like stronger. The first one will just be, because that's what they did the previous time as well, as they played a 2-dayer against England, which is sort of like players out like from beneath, like players from A teams beneath Plunket Shield level. And then the second one was their proper New Zealand A team. So that second game is the 26th of November. So it's only, 3 weeks. It'll be after the next two rounds of the Plunket Shield once we get into like the break, heading into limited overs stuff. But we should get some form of clarity once that I mean, if anything, that New Zealand A team announcement will be more exciting than the Black Caps announcement.
Shout out to Cam Hawkins, because Cam is short for Camden. So, according to Cricinfo, Camden Hawkins, not Cameron, as you would assume with a Cam Hawkins, but Camden. Fairly decent record as well. Little 25-year-old. I think he moved from Central Districts to Otago, maybe. Not sure about that one exactly, but he is averaging 26 after 12 games with the bat. So, shout out to Camden Hawkins.
Scored 90 in his most recent innings too.
He did indeed. Do you have any deep cut player that you want to highlight here, Wildcard? This is your platform just to highlight an individual of your pick, preferably not someone dominating at the moment, but just someone that you are dabbling in a bit of attention with.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got a singular player to chuck up, but I do have a singular idea that this seems as good a time as any to throw out. One of my favorite moments of the last round was and I put up the clip of this as well, was an over that Colin de Gronholm was batting in. He'd come in at a time where Northern were just looking to set a target for Otago. They didn't really, they had runs on the board. It was just a matter of cashing in before, I think it was before a declaration. They ended up, ding, 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 scrolling. Yeah, they did declare 7 down. So de Gronholm comes in, scores 23 runs off 9 deliveries, and in the midst of all that, he took about an over to set himself up, and then Michael Ray comes on to bowl, and de Gronholm, slightly short on leg stump, leans back, lifts it for 6 behind square, gets a similar ball the next time, does the same thing with it, another one the next time, does the same thing with it, so 6-6-6. Looking to do his best Leo Carter impersonation and go all out at this point, like he's halfway to a perfect over. Then the next one, Michael Ray leans it slightly on off stump, and de Gronholm charges down the wicket and edges it behind and is out. So in 6-6-6 wicket, which is I chucked that video up on Twitter because it was extremely entertaining and such pure Colin de Gronholm, like the perfect Colin de Gronholm when there's no stakes, you don't have to worry. He had free license to just swing the bat, and it was exactly what you hope for, just big sixes and also a dramatic wicket. But in amongst that, there's been a little bit of hype about Colin de Gronholm rocking the old mullet these days as well. Let himself, or I guess chosen to express himself over the lockdowns, follically speaking. But up against Michael Ray, you had the mullet against the headband. And I have been I remember discussing, because Michael Ray took a bunch, I think it was him specifically, like him and his headband wearing ways. I think we talked about this in a podcast episode last season, because you don't see a lot of that. You don't, the thick, like the Chris Martin, sort of sweatbandy headbands. You don't see so many of them these days, but I've counted 3 players so far who have worn them, in this first couple rounds of the Plunket Shield. Michael Ray is one, Seth Rance is another, and I'm pretty sure I saw Blair Tickner rocking one as well. So I'm not sure if you've noticed anyone else joining the headband brigade so far, but those are the 3 that I've noticed to date. But I've certainly got my eyes peeled at this point now.
I've got nothing to add as far as headbands go, so nice job by you. I will add, so of those 14 seamers who have taken at least 6 wickets, Michael Ray is the only guy with more than 6 wickets who is averaging more than 30. He's averaging 41, which is probably because of a couple of those sixes. So shout out to Michael Ray. He's still taking wickets. He's still got 7 wickets, which is exactly the same number of wickets as Neil Wagner and Tim Southey. So you're doing nothing wrong with a bit of a 7 wicket haul. Just wee bit expensive, but that's all good. What's cracking on the football desk there, Wildcard? There's not much else happening. Like we've got, it's all a bit of a quiet period. I am hyping about a period that is coming up, Wildcard, where we have Junior Parker. I said it once again. Shout out to Junior Parker. That fight is going to happen where we got Junior Farr and Joseph Parker. Not sure what's happening with the date with that fight, but that's going to happen. And we doesn't look like we're going to get Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker, but we are going to get Israel Adesanya moving up a weight division to fight Jan Blachowicz, which is going to happen definitely like in the next 4 months, I'd say. So in the next 4 months, we're going to have Junior Farr versus Joseph Parker and another Israel Adesanya fight, which is a pretty cool period coming up. And I've just been thinking a lot about that. But we talk about a lot of that stuff all the time, so we don't need to dive into that. But what's happening in the football department? Anything else, Wildcard? What's cracking in that sports brain of yours and what you're covering?
Well, it's probably Wellington Phoenix matters, to be honest. I mean, the women's premiership started this weekend, and I would have liked to have been if I had more time, I would have liked to write about it, but it's hard to watch all the games and get around amongst everything else. So, we'll see how the week goes. But the Wellington Phoenix have certainly been busy, and they've there was a long time where we didn't have anything happening from the Phoenix, and it was frustrating, but it was also understandable. There was the collective bargaining agreement had to be done, and there was they were basically handcuffed by that. They didn't know when the season was going to start and what that would mean in terms of where they could play games and where they could be, all those kind of things. But there was stuff going on behind the scenes, just couldn't formalize and publicize and all those kind of stuff. So what ended up happening is once everything got sort of sorted and they announced we're going to have to start the season for the first couple months at least. In New South Wales, we could be away 6 or 7 months, basically, living in Australia if it works that way, which I think is slightly overblown, to be honest. Chris Wood is away from New Zealand for 12 months of the year, pretty much. He lives in England now because of his football career. This is sort of a thing that professional footballers, professional sportsmen in general, but in particular footballers do. It's different for the Phoenix, obviously, when it's the only professional club in the country. So there is that factor of a lot of players will sign there because of that, because it means they get to stay in New Zealand and play professionally. But it is an enormous sacrifice and an enormous undertaking, but it's not like it's something the players wouldn't be keen to do, I suppose, is the point to make there. But anyway, there's a bunch of bloody signings coming through in the last 7 days, basically, since we did the last podcast. So they already had about, I think, 11 dudes or so under contract. Since then, David Ball has signed on for 2 more years. He was already under contract for this year, but he's signed an extension, so that's pretty cool from an import player to be re-upping at a time when other import players, including the previous club captain, have had to leave because of circumstances. We've got Sam Sutton, the top player in the youth system, getting a 3-year deal, which is, big rewards for him. Tiarawhai Hudson-Wehongi signed on for 2 more years, exactly what we needed. Liam McGing most recently as well. It sounded like he might leave, but there was confusion because there was a McGing trialing with the new MacArthur team. Turned out to be his brother Jake, not Liam. So Liam's ended up staying at the Phoenix, probably playing out of New South Wales at the start helps him as well because he can just live at home. He doesn't have to do the hotel quarantine thing. It's actually easier for him. Him and apparently he's best buds with Cam Devlin as well, so that helps matters. So there's a couple defenders to chuck in there. Clayton Lewis is signed. This was a badly kept secret, but one of the better younger Kiwi players of the premiership level. He's getting to go. A Wellington native as well. James McGarry's back. He's signed on for another year. A year. Having been in the academy back in the day, left to go play professionally in Holland, come back now. Over lockdown. Joshua Laws is a Scottish-born Australian youth international, knows Ufi Talai from the Aussie grades coming up, and is a current teammate in that Aussie Olympic team with Reno Piscopo as well. So he's a tidy left-footed midfielder who's been playing in Germany for several years, trying to work his way up there at, I think it was Fortuna Dusseldorf. Never played for the first team, but played a lot for the reserves. Who can also play centre-back if needed, so also a bit more defensive depth. So suddenly, they're still gonna need to sign an import striker, and it sounds like there's a fella they got in line, used to play for Brighton. They're going to need to sign probably an import centre-back as well to fill those out. The midfield's looking pretty good, though. You might, if they have a bit of money left over, they might be able to fill that last import spot, depending on the financials and whatever. Probably with a creative, like a winger, probably, someone who can provide some assists, maybe a few goals going forward. Other than that, things are looking pretty sorted. I was trying to work out where they were with youth players, because there's the thing of like 3 players under the age of 21 that you got to have. But I think I'm pretty sure they've lifted that this season to 23 now, which means that it goes from having 2 players out of 3 under contract to a whole bunch, because they had a bunch of dudes who were under 21 last year who have since turned 22. So like Devlin and who was McGing and fellas like that. So I think they're sorted from that matter. They can sign, they need a minimum of 20 players, so they're at 17. 2 more imports will take them to 19, so they'll need to sign 1 more, whether it's an import or a local. But I don't expect them to have a huge squad. The travel bubble to New South Wales suggests to me that if things got desperate, like they could bring over a reserve player and they wouldn't have to quarantine. They could go straight into training. They would have to quarantine coming back if nothing changes, but that's fine. You do that if you're a reserve player for the chance to play first team. Other than that, it sounds like we're getting pretty close. Like the players everyone who's under contract now is in the process of, if not already having done so, flying out to I think it's Wollongong for the base, for at least for pre-season, for the start, the university there. So it's all slowly coming together. We'll see how they go in terms of pre-season games and what kind of coverage and whatever we get there from that. But season starts the day after Boxing Day, the 27th of December. So the countdown's now officially on as far as the Wellington Phoenix goes, and we can start to see something close to what their first choice team's going to look like now, based on the players they got locked in.
So how are you observing or feeling their strategies with some of their recruitment for Wellington Phoenix? Like, in the context of maybe today's overall theme, but also specifically with the Wellington Phoenix, there's been like different trends that have emerged. Again, like the Warriors and any other team, different coach has different ideas, has a different style. Right now, it seems like there is it seems like the Wellington Phoenix are aligning themselves with the state of Kiwi football. Is that an accurate statement?
Pretty accurate. I mean, they've got 17 players under contract at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them are New Zealanders. So that's certainly a better proportion than we've had in recent times. And then even like the guys who aren't, they're not older Australian battlers or, whatever. You've got like Cameron Devlin, who's a really exciting young midfielder. You got Josh Laws, who hopefully be something similar. Liam McGing, Reno Piscopo, like Josh Soterio, I suppose, is 25. He's not that young as far as footballers go, but pretty like it's the same coach for one thing. For the first time in 3 years, they had the same coach coming back, so that helps. So there is consistency there. It's a similar kind of recruitment strategy as what they've been doing in recent times. There are a couple of players in the premiership levels who I would have, if he had like given us a little cheeky DM on Twitter or something, I would have suggested a few names that could be added to that mix. But I think just with the nature of this very, very weird season they're about to embark on, I think they probably want to keep things relatively tight knit with a small squad and have things like just as much crossover from last season to carry on the success that they had there into like the flow on into this year. And there's a few areas where they weren't able to do that, but Taylor leaving and a couple others, but Macau at Kakache. But I think like Macau and Kakache leaving, Clayton Lewis comes in for Macau, can also play deeper, but I think at this level he's probably suited to playing a little further forward. I don't know. Or maybe in that Devere role. So if I'm Clayton Lewis going into training with Uli Devere this week, I'm like learning absolutely everything I possibly can from that dude, because I think that's as good a role model as he could ask for. And McGarry is the new Liberato Kakache Kiwi left back coming out of the academy, basically. Like he's not going to be as good as Kakache, because Kakache was a marvel, but he's as close to a straight replacement as they were going to get. It's just, I just think they're trying to keep it nice and consistent from last season, as close as they can. A few players left that they would have preferred to keep, but so it goes. That's just like, that's the natural turnover of a professional sports squad, season in, season out. And I think a lot in terms of their ceiling, in terms of like the upside of this season coming up, an enormous amount depends on basically the caliber of the imports they can get in, whether they can get a striker who can score a whole bunch of goals as Hooper did, but also, unlike Hooper, play consistently, not have the injury struggles, then that would be enormous. Like, that's the biggest thing they could do to boost their chances. And then also getting a centre back who can repeat some of what Stephen Taylor was able to do, then that would also matter enormously. So, I think the baseline in terms of like the Kiwi alignment is the same as it was last season. We're not going to see more of it because of lockdowns or anything like that. But yeah, in terms of their season, a lot basically depends on the caliber of the imports.
Booyakasha. We'll wrap it up there. Unless you've got any other more notes there, Wildcard. We touched on a lot of stuff. What are you covering? You have your Flying Kiwis coming out imminently. What else is on your agenda for the rest of the week?
Yeah, well, you got me thinking about, during the Patreon thing, about whether I should write something about LaMelo and RJ Hampton and the NBA draft and things. It's a possibility. There's a couple of footballing things I have in mind that I won't spoil yet, but we'll see how the week unfolds.
Beauty. We'll be back next week for another episode of the Niche Cast. Check out the little Patreon podcast if you want to support the Niche Case and the Niche Cast. Jump on Patreon. Otherwise, just keep hitting up all our content and tell a friend, tell the whānau. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cha-cha!